The day I learned that love could disappear was the day I stood alone in a white wedding dress while the rain washed away everything I thought my future would be. My grandmother used to say that the worst heartbreak doesn't arrive with screaming or anger. It arrives in silence. Looking back now, I think she was right. The rain fell hard enough to blur the church across the street into a watercolor painting. Cold drops soaked through layers of expensive fabric that had taken 6 months to choose and less than 10 minutes to ruin. My bouquet lay abandoned on the courthouse steps, white roses scattered across the wet concrete like forgotten promises. Guests had already left. Some avoided looking at me. Others stared too long. A few whispered behind polite smiles. I couldn't blame them. 30 minutes earlier, I had been a bride. Now I was a spectacle. My name is Claire Whitmore, and at 27 years old, I watched my husband drive away before our reception even began. I still remember the taillights. Bright red against the gray afternoon sky, growing smaller and smaller until they vanished completely. He never looked back. Not once. My hands trembled as I pulled my phone from my purse. 12 missed calls from my mother. 7 text messages from friends asking if I was okay. 1 message from the man who had just become my husband. Then abandoned me. 3 words. I'm sorry, Claire. That was it. No explanation. No reason. No promise to return. Just 3 words that felt colder than the November rain. I laughed. A small, broken sound that didn't feel like mine. People think heartbreak arrives all at once. It doesn't. It comes in waves. First shock. Then embarrassment. Then the slow realization that everyone around you knows you've been left behind. My mascara had long since surrendered to the weather. Water dripped from my hair. My shoes were ruined. I should have called someone. I should have gone home. Instead, I stood there frozen beneath dark clouds, staring at the empty road as if I could somehow force time backward. The wind pushed against me, carrying the smell of wet pavement and distant traffic. Somewhere nearby, church bells rang the hour. Life continued. Cars passed. Strangers hurried beneath umbrellas. The city moved forward while mine seemed to stop completely. Then I heard the sound. Not thunder. Not rain. Engines. Several of them. Deep. Powerful. Approaching slowly. I looked up through the storm and saw a line of black SUVs turning the corner. Their headlights cut through the rain like beams of gold. The lead vehicle slowed as it reached the curb in front of me. For a moment, I thought it was a coincidence. Just another wealthy businessman arriving somewhere important. Then the SUV stopped directly beside me. The rear passenger door opened. And everything changed. The man who stepped out of the SUV looked completely untouched by the storm. Rain slid from the shoulders of his black overcoat as if it had been instructed not to linger. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair swept back and sharp features that belonged on the cover of a magazine rather than standing in front of a shattered bride on a city sidewalk. But it was his eyes that caught me first. Green. Calm. Observant. The kind of eyes that seemed to notice everything without revealing anything. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The rain filled the silence between us. I tightened my grip on my purse and took an instinctive step backward. Every warning my mother had ever given me flashed through my head. Do not get into cars with strangers. Do not trust people who appear out of nowhere. Do not accept help that sounds too good to be true. The stranger glanced down at the bouquet lying in pieces near my feet. Then he looked at my wedding dress. Then at the empty road where my husband had disappeared. Understanding crossed his face without a single question being asked. You are going to catch pneumonia standing out here, he said. His voice was low and controlled. Not cold. Not warm. Simply certain. I almost laughed. Of all the things that had happened today, pneumonia seemed very low on my list of problems. I will be fine, I replied, even though my teeth were beginning to chatter. His gaze lingered on me for another moment. No, he said quietly. You will not. Something about the certainty in his answer irritated me. Maybe because it was true. Maybe because I was tired of people deciding things for me. I do not even know who you are. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. My name is Dante Moretti. The name meant nothing to me. At least not then. Behind him, Several men remained near the other vehicles. They wore dark suits and maintained a respectful distance. None of them spoke. None of them moved. They simply waited. It was oddly unsettling. Dante removed his coat and held it out toward me. The fabric looked expensive. Probably more expensive than my entire wedding dress. Take it. I am fine. You're soaked. I said I am fine. For the first time, genuine amusement appeared in his eyes. You were abandoned in a thunderstorm wearing heels you can barely stand in. You were arguing with a stranger while shaking from the cold. Claire, you are many things right now. Fine is not one of them. My heart stopped. Just for a second. How do you know my name? The amusement vanished. Because half the guests have been posting about today for the last hour. He nodded toward my phone. The internet moves fast. Embarrassment hit me harder than the rain ever could. Of course people were talking. Of course videos were already spreading. Somewhere online, strangers were probably watching the worst day of my life between advertisements and cat videos. I looked away, suddenly unable to meet his eyes. Dante noticed. He noticed everything. Without another word, he stepped forward and draped the coat over my shoulders. The warmth surprised me. So did the gesture. For the first time since the ceremony collapsed, someone was treating me like a human being instead of a public disaster. Come with me, he said. Where? Somewhere dry. I should have refused. Every sensible instinct told me to refuse. Instead, I looked up at the gray sky, felt another cold gust of wind cut through the rain, and realized I had nowhere else in the world I wanted to be. Then Dante opened the SUV door, and for reasons I could not yet explain, I found myself stepping toward it. The interior of the SUV smelled faintly of leather and cedar. Warm air brushed against my freezing skin the moment. The door closed behind me. Outside, the rain continued to pound against the windows, turning the city into a blur of silver and gray. For the first time all day, I was not standing in the middle of a disaster for strangers to watch. I sat quietly, clutching the edges of Dante's coat around my shoulders. Neither of us spoke as the vehicle pulled away from the curb. The silence should have been awkward. Somehow it was not. Maybe because I was too exhausted to fill it. Maybe because Dante seemed like the kind of man who never spoke simply to hear his own voice. I stared out the window as familiar streets disappeared behind us. My phone vibrated again. Then again. Then again. The screen lit up with my mother's name. My best friend, Sarah. 3 cousins. 2 coworkers. A dozen notifications from social media. Everyone wanted answers. Unfortunately, I did not have any. I switched the phone off completely and dropped it into my purse. Dante noticed. Of course he noticed. That bad? He asked. I let out a humorless laugh. I think the entire city knows I got married and abandoned within the same hour. His expression remained calm. The city will find something else to talk about tomorrow. You seem very confident about that. People are not nearly as interested in our pain as we think they are. I looked at him. That is surprisingly comforting. It is also true. The vehicle stopped at a red light. Reflected brake lights painted the cabin in soft crimson. For a moment, I studied the man sitting beside me. He looked completely composed. Not distracted. Not curious. Not even judgmental. Most people would have asked questions by now. What happened? Why did he leave? Are you okay? Dante asked none of them. That alone felt strange. You have not asked why he left, I said quietly. If you want to tell me, you will. I looked down at my hands. And if I do not? Then I will still make sure you are warm and dry. Something tightened unexpectedly in my chest. It had been a long time since kindness came without conditions attached. The city skyline gradually changed outside the windows. Smaller buildings gave way to glass towers. The streets grew quieter. More private. More expensive. 20 minutes later, the SUV turned through a pair of wrought iron gates and followed a long driveway lined with trees wrapped in tiny white lights. My mouth fell slightly open. The house at the end was less a house and more an estate. Warm golden light glowed through massive windows. The stone exterior looked like something from a luxury magazine. You live here? I asked. Sometimes. That answer somehow raised more questions than it answered. The vehicle rolled to a stop beneath a covered entrance. Before I could reach for the handle, one of the men from the convoy opened my door. Rain no longer touched me. The entrance sheltered us completely. I stepped out slowly, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Dante joined me beside the SUV. "Come inside, Claire." I hesitated. My entire life had fallen apart less than 2 hours ago. Common sense told me I should be terrified. Instead, standing beneath the soft lights of a place I had never seen before, I felt something I had not felt all day. Safe. Then the front doors opened, and a silver-haired woman hurried toward us with visible concern. She took one look at my wedding dress, and her expression changed completely. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. Then she turned toward Dante. "What happened to this poor girl?" The woman could not have been more than 60, but she moved with the energy of someone much younger. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, and kindness radiated from her face in a way that immediately made me want to cry. Maybe because kindness was the last thing I expected to find tonight. Dante glanced at me before answering. "She has had a difficult evening." The woman looked from him to me and back again. That is the understatement of the century. She stepped forward without hesitation and gently took my hand. "Come inside, sweetheart. You are freezing." I followed her into the house. Warmth wrapped around me instantly. The scent of fresh bread and cinnamon drifted through the air. Soft music played somewhere in the distance. Everything felt impossibly normal compared to the chaos of the last few hours. The woman introduced herself as Margaret. She seemed completely comfortable ordering everyone around, including Dante. "Do not just stand there," she told him. "The poor girl needs tea, dry clothes, and probably a hug." To my surprise, one corner of Dante's mouth lifted. "I can handle the tea." Margaret rolled her eyes. That was not the part one was worried about. For the first time all day, a tiny laugh escaped me. It surprised all three of us. Margaret squeezed my hand. "There she is." She led me upstairs to a beautiful guest room overlooking the property. Rain streaked across the tall windows. Beyond them, the grounds stretched into darkness, illuminated by scattered lights along winding paths. The room itself was larger than my entire apartment. Margaret opened a closet filled with neatly arranged clothing. "You can borrow whatever you like." I stared. "You keep extra wardrobes for guests?" Dante attracts unusual situations. The answer somehow explained nothing and everything at once. 20 minutes later, I stood beneath steaming water in a marble shower, letting the day wash away. My wedding dress was gone, folded somewhere downstairs. The makeup had disappeared from my face. My hair hung damp around my shoulders. Looking at my reflection afterward felt strange. For the first time since morning, I looked like Claire Whitmore instead of a failed bride. Yet somehow that hurt even more. Because now there was nothing left to distract me from reality. My marriage had lasted less than a day. A knock sounded at the door. "Claire," Margaret called softly. "Tea is ready." I followed her downstairs. Dante sat near a fireplace, reviewing something on a tablet. The flames cast warm light across the room. He looked up as I entered. His eyes paused briefly before returning to my face. Not evaluating. Not judging. Simply making sure I was all right. Margaret handed me a cup of tea and disappeared, claiming she had important things to do. I suspected she was giving us privacy. The silence settled again. This time it felt heavier. I stared into the tea. Dante studied the fire. Finally, I asked the question that had been growing in my mind ever since we left the church. "Why did you stop?" He looked at me. "What do you mean?" "There are thousands of people in this city. Why stop for me?" The fire crackled softly between us. Dante's expression became unreadable. Then he said something I did not expect. "Because everyone else was watching." I blinked. "And?" His gaze held mine. Calm. Steady. Certain. Someone should have helped instead. At that exact moment, a phone vibrated on the table beside him. Dante glanced at the screen. The warmth in his expression vanished instantly. Not anger. Not fear. Something closer to concern. Then he looked back at me and asked a question that changed everything. "Claire, before today, did your husband ever mention a man named Victor Kane?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I searched my memory, replaying conversations from the past 2 years, late-night dinners, weekend plans, countless small moments that suddenly felt unreliable. Victor Kane. The name sounded familiar, but not in a way I could immediately place. I shook my head slowly. I do not think so. Dante remained silent for a moment, studying my expression as if searching for something hidden beneath my answer. Finally, he nodded. Think carefully. His voice was calm, but the concern I had noticed earlier had not disappeared. If anything, it seemed deeper now. I set my tea down. Why are you asking about him? The fire crackled softly between us. Outside, rain continued tapping against the windows. Dante glanced toward the tablet resting beside him. Because your husband has been meeting with him. Every muscle in my body tightened. How would you know that? His eyes met mine. Because Victor Kane has been on my radar for a long time. That answer raised even more questions. Before I could ask them, fragments of memory suddenly surfaced. A phone call 3 months earlier. My husband stepping onto the balcony to take it. The way his voice had changed when he thought I could not hear him. Another memory followed. A dinner reservation canceled at the last minute because of an unexpected meeting. Then another. A business card I had found in his jacket pocket bearing only a phone number and the initials VK. At the time, I had not thought much about it. Now my stomach sank. I remember something. I said quietly. Dante leaned forward slightly. I explained the phone call, the canceled meetings, the card. Each detail seemed small on its own, but together they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. Dante listened without interrupting. When I finished, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What is happening? I asked. Please stop treating me like I am fragile. If there is something I need to know, tell me. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he sighed softly. I am trying to determine whether you were involved. The words landed like ice water. Involved in what? Nothing criminal, he said immediately. Nothing like that. But sometimes people become connected to situations without realizing it. I stared at him. You think my husband was hiding something from me? I know he was. The certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. My chest tightened. The humiliation from the church suddenly felt different. Bigger. More complicated. What if today had not simply been a man abandoning his bride? What if there had been another reason? Another layer I had never seen. My phone suddenly buzzed inside my purse. Both of us looked toward it. For a moment neither moved. Then I reached for it. The screen illuminated the dark room. One new message. Unknown number. No name attached. No explanation. Just a single sentence. My blood ran cold as I read it. Do not trust Dante Moretti. Ask your husband what really happened today. For several seconds, I could do nothing except stare at the message. The words seemed to pulse against the screen. Do not trust Dante Moretti. Ask your husband what really happened today. A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the rain outside. Dante watched my expression carefully. He did not ask to see the phone. He did not reach for it. He simply waited. That somehow made me more nervous. What is it? He asked quietly. I swallowed. Every instinct told me to hide the message. Another part of me was tired of secrets. Exhausted by them. Today had already proven how dangerous hidden truths could become. Without speaking, I handed him the phone. His eyes moved across the screen. For the first time since meeting him, I saw genuine irritation flash across his face. It disappeared almost immediately, but I caught it. You know who sent it, I said. It was not a question. Dante placed the phone on the table. I have a suspicion. Victor Kane. His silence answered for him. The room suddenly felt smaller. The fire continued burning. The rain continued falling. Yet everything seemed different now. More complicated. More uncertain. Then tell me what is happening. My voice came out sharper than intended. Everyone keeps acting like I am standing in the middle of something important while nobody explains what it is. Dante leaned back in his chair. For a long moment he looked toward the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. Victor Kane builds relationships by finding people who are desperate. People who think they have no options. I thought of my husband. The canceled meetings. The strange phone calls. the stress he had carried during the last few months. You think he got involved with Victor? I know they were working together. My stomach tightened. Doing what? Business deals. Investments. Promises. Dante's jaw hardened slightly. The kind of promises that become expensive. I remembered countless evenings when my husband had insisted everything was fine while looking anything but fine. I remembered unopened bills disappearing from the kitchen counter. New purchases that did not make sense. Sudden optimism followed by unexplained anxiety. Looking back now, the warning signs seemed obvious. At the time, I had called it wedding stress. The realization hurt. Not because I had missed the signs. Because he had chosen not to trust me with them. Margaret appeared briefly carrying a tray of fresh tea and pastries. One glance at our faces told her this was not a conversation she wanted to interrupt. She quietly placed everything down and disappeared again. Her kindness nearly broke me. Dante waited until she left before speaking again. Claire, there is something you need to understand. I looked up. His green eyes met mine steadily. Whatever your husband was involved in, none of it is your fault. The simple statement hit harder than any explanation. Because deep down, part of me had already begun blaming myself. Maybe I had missed something. Maybe I should have asked more questions. Maybe I should have seen this coming. Tears threatened unexpectedly. I looked away toward the fire. Then why leave me? I whispered. The question escaped before I could stop it. Not why lie. Not why hide things. Why leave me? Dante's expression changed. Something softer appeared there. Almost sad. I do not know, he admitted. Then his phone rang. The sound cut through the room like a warning bell. He glanced at the screen. Whatever he saw immediately erased the softness from his face. Slowly, he stood. Claire, he said carefully. Your husband just arrived at the front gate. My heart stopped. For a moment I thought I had imagined the words. Then I saw the expression on Dante's face and knew I had not. My husband was here. After disappearing. After leaving me standing alone in the rain. After a single text message that explained nothing. He was suddenly at the gate. Every emotion I had spent hours trying to suppress rushed back at once. Anger. Confusion. Relief. Hurt. Dante watched me carefully. You do not have to see him. I stood slowly. No. My voice surprised even me. I do. Outside, the rain had finally begun to ease. The storm that had dominated the entire afternoon was fading into a cold mist that drifted across the property. Dante and I walked through the house in silence. I noticed staff members quietly stepping aside as we passed. Nobody asked questions. Nobody stared. It felt strange after being watched by an entire wedding crowd earlier that day. When we reached the front entrance, I could see headlights beyond the gates. A dark sedan waited outside. The security monitor beside the door displayed a familiar face. My husband looked exhausted. His tie was gone. His hair was disheveled. He seemed nothing like the confident man who had stood beside me during our ceremony only hours earlier. Something twisted painfully inside my chest. Dante looked at me. The decision is yours. I stared at the screen. For several long seconds I could not move. Then I nodded. Let him in. The gates slowly opened. A minute later the sedan rolled up the driveway. I stood near the entrance as the vehicle stopped. The driver's door opened. My husband stepped out. For a moment he simply stared at me. His eyes widened slightly as if he could not believe I was standing there. Then he started toward me. Claire. Hearing my name from his lips felt different now. Distant somehow. He stopped a few feet away. Rain clung to his jacket. His face looked pale beneath the driveway lights. Claire, thank God. I folded my arms. Do not. He froze. Do not act relieved to see me now. Pain flashed across his face. Please let me explain. I laughed quietly. The sound held no humor. You had hours to explain. His gaze dropped briefly. I know. You left. My voice trembled despite my efforts to control it. You left me standing there in front of everyone. He closed his eyes. I never wanted that to happen. But it did. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, he looked past me toward Dante. Something changed in his expression. Not fear exactly. More like resignation. As though he had expected to find him here. Dante remained calm beside me, saying nothing. My husband took a slow breath. Then he looked back at me. Claire, there are things you do not know. I shook my head. Then tell me. His eyes filled with regret. Real regret. The kind that could not be faked. I was trying to protect you. The words hung between us. I had heard them before in movies. In books. They always sounded noble. Tonight they sounded like another secret. Before I could answer, my husband reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. His hands shook as he held it toward me. Everything is in here, he said quietly. The truth. The debts. Victor Kane. All of it. Then he looked directly at Dante. And the reason Claire was never supposed to meet you. The world seemed to stop moving. Rain drifted softly through the night air. The driveway lights cast pale reflections across the wet stone beneath our feet. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. My eyes remained fixed on the envelope in my husband's trembling hand. What does that mean? I asked quietly. My voice sounded distant, almost unrecognizable. He looked exhausted. Older. Somehow than he had that morning. Claire, there are things about your family you never knew. My heart sank. Those were never good words. Not in movies. Not in real life. Especially not on a day that had already destroyed everything I thought I understood. Slowly, I took the envelope from him. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Inside were documents. Financial records. Contracts. Printed emails. Photographs. More photographs than I could count. My eyes moved across the first page. Then the second. Then the third. Each one pulled another piece of the truth into focus. My husband had accumulated enormous debt during the past 18 months. Failed investments. Bad partnerships. Desperate decisions. Every attempt to recover only made things worse. Then Victor Kane appeared. Offering solutions. Offering opportunities. Offering hope. The kind of hope that comes with invisible strings attached. My stomach twisted as I continued reading. Several contracts contained my name. My signature was not there, but my name was. My identity. My assets. My future. Used as collateral without my knowledge. I looked up sharply. You used my name? Tears filled his eyes. I thought I could fix it before you ever found out. The words hurt more than I expected. Not because of the money. Because of the betrayal. The man I trusted most had made decisions about my life without giving me a choice. Dante remained silent beside me. Watching. Listening. Letting the truth reveal itself. Then I reached the final pages. The photographs. My breath caught. One image showed my father standing beside a much younger Dante. Another showed my father shaking hands with an older man who shared Dante's eyes. Another showed all three smiling at some long-forgotten event nearly 20 years ago. I stared at the images in disbelief. What is this? My husband lowered his gaze. Dante answered instead. Your father saved my family's business from collapsing. I looked at him. Shocked. My father never mentioned you. He would not have. His voice remained calm. He did not help us for recognition. He helped because it was the right thing to do. I looked back at the photographs. Suddenly dozens of childhood memories returned. My father speaking warmly about integrity. About keeping promises. About helping people even when nobody was watching. The same values that had guided my entire life. Victor discovered the connection, Dante continued. When your husband became indebted to him, he saw an opportunity. What opportunity? I whispered. Dante's eyes met mine. To use you. Silence settled over the driveway. Heavy and absolute. My husband wiped at his eyes. That is why I left today. I stared at him. You abandoned me to protect me? Victor wanted access to you through me. The wedding would have given him that. The only way I could stop it was to walk away before everything became official. I wanted to be angry. Part of me still was. But another part finally understood the fear I had been seeing in him for months. The desperation. The secrets. The panic hidden behind forced smiles. For the first time all day, the pieces fit together. Not perfectly. Not painlessly. But enough. Then Dante stepped forward and gently closed the envelope in my hands. Whatever happens next, he said quietly, nobody gets to decide your future except you. And standing there beneath the fading rain, I realized it was the first time anyone had said those words to me all day. The strange thing about life is that the moments you think will define you often turn out to be the beginning instead of the end. Dawn arrived quietly. By the time the sun rose above the trees surrounding the estate, the storm had completely disappeared. Golden light spilled across the wet grounds, transforming everything the rain had touched into something brighter. I stood alone on the terrace holding a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Below me, the world looked peaceful. It was hard to believe that less than 24 hours earlier I had been standing in a ruined wedding dress, convinced my life was over. Footsteps approached behind me. I did not need to turn around to know it was Dante. Somehow I had learned the sound of his presence. He stopped beside me, looking out across the property. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence felt comfortable now. Familiar. Your husband left an hour ago, he said quietly. I nodded. We had talked for most of the night. The truth had not erased the pain. It had not repaired the trust that had been broken. But it had given me answers. Real answers. Sometimes that is all closure can offer. He is going to cooperate with the investigation into Victor Kane, Dante continued. It will take time, but he will be all right. I stared at the sunrise. I hope so. And surprisingly, I meant it. Not because I wanted him back. Not because I could forget what happened. But because carrying anger forever felt like giving the worst day of my life permission to control the rest of it. Dante studied me for a moment. You are different this morning. I smiled faintly. I think I am tired. He shook his head. No. Stronger. The compliment settled somewhere deep inside me. Not because it came from him. Because for the first time, I believed it. A week later, I returned to my apartment. 2 months later, I finalized the end of a marriage that had never truly begun. 6 months later, I started a nonprofit organization using funds my father had quietly left behind years earlier. An organization dedicated to helping people rebuild after financial betrayal and personal loss. It was not revenge. It was purpose. And purpose heals things that anger never can. Dante remained part of my life. Not as a rescuer. Not as a savior. He never tried to make my decisions for me. He simply stood beside me when I needed support and stepped back when I needed space. The way real respect always does. Sometimes people ask me what I remember most about that day. They expect me to talk about the wedding, the humiliation, the heartbreak. But they're always wrong. What I remember most is standing in the rain believing I had lost everything. Then discovering that losing the wrong future sometimes makes room for the right one. My grandmother used to say that character is revealed when nobody is watching. I think she was only half right. Sometimes character is revealed when everyone is watching and you decide to stand back up anyway. And if I learned anything from that impossible day, it is this. The people who truly belong in your life will never leave. You standing alone in the storm. They will walk beside you until the sun comes back.